welcome everyone. Some thought it would never happen. Some thought that Alex D and Alex G are actually the same person, just doing accents all the time. So ladies and gentlemen, it is finally happening, and it is happening right here, right now. From the Roebuck pub in South London, we bring you the very first live episode of Troublesome Terps, the podcast about the things that keep interpreters up at night. Can we have a round of applause, please, for everyone who's joining us tonight? Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's amazing to have you lovely people join us for this extra special event sponsored by Linguali and Interpreters Help.
We really do want to say thank you to our sponsors and to our incredible audience, although we did get them to sign those waivers not to break the mystique, didn't we?
What mystique do you mean?
What do you mean?
Well, now they know what our recordings look like.
Oh, yeah, well, could be a problem though, no?
Well, there's enough drinks to go around, right?
Yeah.
For us.
Let's just get on with the show, right?
Yeah, that'll work.
They don't notice, okay.
Fair enough. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce my fellow Troublesome Terps. You've already heard them. First off, never was there a man so dedicated to Vorsprung durch Technik. It's our very own Alexander Drexel.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, and just a quick technical note. I may have to roam around the room just checking the cameras from time to time, so don't be irritated by that. Just want to make sure that my two lovely co-hosts look just as well on video as they do in real life.
You're a man of faith.
I am.
Also on the show, we have the man who didn't hear his phone until he put a ring on it. It's Alexander Gansmeyer.
Thank you very much. But I think we all know who the Beyonce is in this trio. But let's not forget the man who assures both of us that he has seen Sunshine on Leith. He even walked 500 miles to get here. Jonathan Downey.
It's good to be here. I cannot believe that the Alexes actually do both exist. That's breaking the laws of physics.
Yep. We want to thank you, the lovely audience, as well, and especially give a shout out to the Roebuck, which is this wonderful place that we can be here tonight, which we came across more or less by coincidence, but we're very glad we found them. As you may have noticed, as a pub, it's very focused on sustainability and community. For example, about the straws, you may have seen you only get a straw when you ask for one because, think of all the oceans and fish and everything, so that's good.
And the strawmen.
And the strawmen, exactly. The Roebuck also works with MenCap, which is a UK-based non-profit, and they support people with learning difficulties and their families moving on in their lives. The kitchen serves sustainable, healthy food, as you may have seen, and they also have refilling water, which is great for podcast hosting live events. The room we're in here is called the Victorian Lounge. And over the years, it has not only hosted 3 podcasters, but supposedly also the young Charlie Chaplin, or so they say. There's a rumor floating around. And British jazz orchestra Loose Tubes. Anybody familiar with the Loose Tubes? I wasn't, but apparently they were a big deal. So if you're a local, come back anytime because they have great live events as well, comedy, spoken word, pub quizzes, and so on and so forth. And just a fun fact, the Roebuck is not only the popular name for the male deer, known to experts like us as capriolis, right?
I knew him very well.
You knew him very well. It's also used by 14 different Royal Navy ships around the world that traveled as far as Australia. So thanks again to Max and the entire Roebuck team for having us. Thank you very much.
So how this afternoon is going to work is that we're going to be starting with a little bit of an icebreaker exercise where you guys might also have to suffer with us. And afterwards, we're going to be talking about our first topic. Then we have a short interlude with a very special guest that we're going to be introducing as and when. And afterwards, you guys can grab refreshments, have a quick bathroom break, and then we go into the second topic. And we should be finished at around 6 p.m., I think. You will also find, as I've mentioned, or as Jonathan mentioned more, so the name tags at the front. If you haven't checked in, if you're missing your goodie bag, please do come to me after the podcast. Of course, you're going to get it. And as you've seen on the tables, you will have bingo sheets. I know, what a surprise. And Jonathan will now explain to you how those work.
Yeah. So it just so happens that apparently we're slightly predictable. So on those bingo sheets, you have a Troublesome Terps podcast bingo sheet. And you have an Interpreting in the Booth bingo sheet. For this afternoon, we're using the Troublesome Terps bingo sheet. And if you hear any of us saying or doing any of those things, such as Alexander Gansmeyer collapsing into giggles,
that has never happened.
Or me saying the word controversial over and over and over again. Then you mark it off. And as those who may not have played bingo know, you've got to get all of your squares, and the first person to fill their entire sheet shouts bingo, and we give you a prize.
Yeah. That's right.
It's very straightforward.
Far more straightforward than Brexit. Oh, crap.
Oh, no. That was a freebie for all of you.
To kick that.
Right. I think we have a few non-interpreters in the audience, if I'm not mistaken.
We're not going to out you.
So we wanted to start things off really, really simply and maybe explain our profession a little bit for those not so much in the know. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's this thing floating around on social media where you kind of badly explain your profession, and we thought we might give this a shot.
Yeah. Jonathan, do you want to kick it off? I feel like this is right up your alley.
They do this to me on every single show. Okay, so I was on the flight down, and I thought that the best way to explain what a conference interpreter does is I sit in a box and talk until they give me money. There you go.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I think another good way to describe what we do is kind of just listen to the voices in our head and obey their every command.
Yeah, I was actually reminded, thinking about this, of supposed OECD study that is floating around for decades now, I think, where apparently the job of the interpreter is just as stressful as the jet pilot. Has anybody actually seen this study? Because I think it's been debunked. And it's a unicorn anyway. It probably doesn't even exist. I don't know. But I'm glad to hear it's debunked. Yeah. So that should give people a little bit of a flavor of what we do.
Yeah.
Jet pilot in a booth.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
You also sit in a box as a jet pilot, right? So
sort of.
Sort of flying. If my interpreting booth ever takes off, that'd be really cool, but really scary at the same time. Yeah. Although I must admit there have been some meetings where I've been going, "Come fly away."
Yeah. I mean, we all had this synchronous translation. And
of course.
Instant translation, like instant coffee and.
So someone said to me, "Can you translate simultaneously?" I said, "No, I can't type that fast."
Yeah, exactly. You should work on your typing skills, I think. But it's actually quite easy to annoy interpreters, right? Because we're going to be talking about this a bit later on in the afternoon. It's very easy to annoy interpreters. How do you do that?
Yes.
I mean, you could keep them away from the buffet. That would be a very easy way to annoy interpreters.
You could offer them instant coffee.
Yeah. Well,
never good.
It's better than no coffee.
That's true.
So.
Or the other one is, has anyone ever had a meeting where someone puts their hand up and says, "Madam Chair, I would like to ask a question." And the chair, who's obviously not sane, says, "Sure, go ahead." And the person stands up with 8 sheets of A4 paper, written in size 6 font, and scans it like this. And then just when you think that everyone can go for coffee, what do? They rattle the sheets, turn them over, and start from the back. That is my number one. So I have come up with an invention that I'm going to get a speaker electrocutor. So anyone who does that gets a small electric shock through their shoes.
It's a bit. You could actually repurpose the slow button, because it never works in most consoles.
Oh, yeah,
the slow button.
No,
and then it just give it a zip.
What happens when you press the slow button is the sound man laughs at you.
Yeah, exactly. If they even notice at all. But we had, by the way, we had another event already this morning. We went to London Met University and talked to a couple of students, which was really nice because they had a few interesting questions for us. But we did. There was this one thing that I wanted to mention. What did we talk about? Oh, right, getting 50 different documents the night before. That's also a good way to annoy interpreters.
Yeah, that's always great.
And then you had a very controversial statement because you said that maybe it's better not to look at any of it and just get a good night's sleep instead.
Well, it's all about making sure that you get there with a good night's sleep, and then you can still kind of pretend that you never got the email or something. I don't know.
Or the other one, has anyone ever had an event where it says, "Great, we've got free Wi-Fi here," and the Wi-Fi is free and works perfectly until you need to look up terminology. For some reason, all your terminology sites just collapse at the same time.
Yeah, because I think it's kind of a conflict between cyberspace and the interpreting space. I think that's what's happening. Bingo! Now we got this out of the way, we can actually, move to it.
So I'm really interested. I think we should go back, because for interpreters, you've all been incredibly quiet. That's not normal for interpreters, okay?
I think it's because so many others interpreters are in the room. I think it's kind of
has anyone heard of Interpricide? So someone's doing research on the fear of performing in front of fellow interpreters. I was like,
think accreditation test or final exam or something.
Or even you go into a job and someone comes up and says, yeah, I used to be a member of IEC. Then you run away.
It's a lot to go into, actually. I used to be. It's actually a lot of... Anyway.
A lot to unpack there.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not unpack that. Security might come and get us.
Yeah. Should we just move on to the first topic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we have prepared a few topics. You won't have to be involved all evening, but you are free to do so, of course. But the first topic that we picked might be slightly controversial. Hashtag controversial. Because we wanted to talk a little bit...
Not even me!
I think it's one of your favorite topics.
Yes.
And I think all of our favorite. We want to talk a little bit about client expectations. And actually, the subtitle was Lies That We Tell Clients. I mean, talking about controversial. So
Very much, yeah.
I don't know what kind of... Because we of course, said the sensible thing to the students this morning is that we try to not educate, but try to inform our clients and try to give them, fact-based information to make communication work seamlessly. But maybe sometimes we have to twist facts a little bit.
I've never lied, but I did have one client where I managed to not look like I was angry. So we were doing a summit from the Scottish Parliament, and if you want to know pressure, you have about 150 culture ministers in front of you in the debating chamber, and we were interpreting for this very well-known person in the computer games industry, and he sent an aide 5 minutes before his plenary saying, We've got his speech for you. It was in size 8, single-spaced. And I had said to my booth mate, it was the first time I'd worked with this guy. He had 35 years of experience. And I said to him, look, it's a computer games guy. I've been playing computer games since I was 4. I can interpret this guy in my sleep. I'll take his plenary. You can go for a break if you want. His speech comes into the booth. 25-minute plenary, 15 minutes of the ancient Greek education system. So I said, yeah, that'll be fine.
You did have classics in school, didn't you? No? Sorry.
Okay, you didn't... Classics in the west of Scotland were Robert Burns.
Yeah, and haggis, I guess. I don't know.
If we had a Scottish interpreting bingo, haggis would be the centre square.
We'll do that next time. We'll do the live event in Edinburgh. Or in Glasgow, maybe.
Or in Glasgow, that's right. Yeah, but I think sometimes it actually already starts, like those whole client expectations and the lies we tell to the clients, or... I don't even know if we should call them lies. Maybe we should find a more pleasant word for that. But like sometimes it already starts when they give the call and they're like, so we have this conference on, since we've already talked about this today, on Bavarian mining law. Do you know anything about that? And it's like, yeah, sure. I'm an expert on that topic. But it would be really great if we could, of course, get the presentations to prepare just to make sure that we really get the message across. And not necessarily Bavarian mining law, but those kinds of things occur time and time again. Like, do you know, like, are you good with this topic? And I think it's always up to, and it's usually like, oh, sure, yeah, we're very comfortable with that. We're all-rounders, like, we can always find our way into any topic. But I think it's not necessarily... I think it's not a lie. I think we're just comforting the client. We're just reassuring them that they're in good hands because we know that eventually they will be. I think in that instance, though, it's mostly up to you to make sure that you actually got this. Like, don't say, sure, we got this. If you know, like, oh, this is actually legal. I have no idea about any of that stuff. So then probably it's a good idea to not do that.
I did have one client come up to me and say, so how long have you been in the explosives industry?
Well, you're interpreting as the bomb.
But it's one of these things where you have to look professional no matter what. And sometimes you can just say to clients, I'm a really good researcher. Other times you have to go, well... Depending on the quality of the brief, we could do a really good job here.
So you're just placing the blame squarely on the client.
This is why I have a standard brief, because that's right, I arrived at a wood economy job. Has anyone ever interpreted on the economics of wood?
I think I might have.
Actually.
Serious. I didn't realize there were wood economists. I didn't even realize that branch existed.
Insert your... long devoir joke here.
We'll insert the rim shot later.
Exactly. It's going into the final edit.
So we did this wood economy job. I did this wood economy job because the agency lied. Has anyone ever had an agency lie to them? Yeah, there'll be 2 interpreters there, and you turn up and you're the only person there. There'll be equipment there, right? Oh no, you're fine with a day and a half of chuchotage on your own, aren't you?
Yes. And again, it's a dying swan.
Yeah, but actually, I was going to get to that because that's one of the things that we mentioned with the students this morning. Is there's this image of the swan, where you're like beautiful, up here, and you're kind of paddling
for dear life,
frantically down there. Yeah. But I think what the client wants is the swan. They don't want the paddling. They want the swans and the poker face, I guess.
They want the poker face. They do want the poker face.
But since you just mentioned that brief, maybe we should start at the very beginning and talk a little bit about why clients book interpreters, because they don't necessarily only book interpreters for enabling communication. Sometimes they just, that happens in my interpreting space. Sorry. They just want someone to be in the booth so it looks nice, that kind of thing. Does that ever happen on the private market, though? Yeah? Okay, good. I don't know if I should be relieved right now.
Have you ever had a sit there and look pretty job?
Unfortunately, no. So I'm not sure I would be very good at that.
We had another one of these summits at the Scottish Parliament, and they had booked something like 16 interpreters over 4 languages.
Jesus.
And we were in the middle of one of the plenaries, and we were off duty that plenary, and I sat next to my booth mate, and I went, "Can you see anyone with a headset on?" And he went, "Hold on, let me see." And he gets up, and we were at the back of the debating chamber, so he does a kind of prairie dog thing of,
"Oh, look."
And he said, "The only person who's got a headset on is the presiding officer. And I think that's just so she can hear people."
He's probably just checking on you. Yeah.
"So there are 16 of us here, and how many people listening?" And he went, "Don't tell the client."
That's right.
So there are jobs where... So in my PhD thesis, I call that symbolic interpreting.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Oh, that's a nice way of phrasing it, instead of being...
So are we going to go into my PhD thesis? We might as well.
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay, keep it quick.
But there are 3 sets of client expectations. There is symbolic interpreting, where they see you as valuable, but you're not really necessary. Then there's the most common, which is called incidental interpreting, which is the sit there and talk type of interpreting, where they don't see you as very valuable, but they kind of have to have you. So just get... the clients who say, just say what the person says and don't bother us. Incidental interpreting. And then occasionally, out of nowhere, like the sun shining on a wet Glasgow day, you have...
That's not a thing, though.
It is a thing. I got sunburn once. Or was that frostbite? I can't remember. You have integral interpreting, which is where they see you as valuable for their future and necessary. Yeah. And those clients invariably want you to work as their partner. So they come up to you and say things like, "I really don't want to upset the French delegation. Is this joke going to be okay?" Or, "I really do want to upset the German delegation. How do I do that?" and those kind of clients are amazing. I had one integral interpreting client where I helped them win a multi-million-pound deal, and the CEO came up to me at the end and they said, "I speak French and I understood everything. I just didn't have a clue what was going on." Which in a business negotiation is quite common. No one does.
It is,
we know all about negotiations where no one knows anything that's going on.
But if we go back to the first thing, so you said not necessary but valuable. So would that include the situation that we also discussed this morning, I think, where you're not really interpreting from one language to another, but you're kind of interpreting Globish or bad English into something that somebody can listen to for a longer amount of time?
Well, the point of symbolic interpreting is if you took the interpreters away, the clients would understand you anyway. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
If the clients would understand each other. So, for example, if the interpreters could go on strike and no one knew you were on strike, you've got symbolic interpreting. If they go on strike and everyone's going, "Where's the little man in my headset?" or "the little lady in my headset gone?" Then
the box is not working.
The box is not working. If I shake it hard enough, then you've got incidental or integral interpreting.
But I think sometimes the lines are kind of blurred, aren't they? Because just a few weeks ago, I went to the trade fair and I had a job there, and we didn't really see the audience, so we didn't really know if somebody was listening. And eventually, we kind of became friends out of necessity with the hostess that actually handed out the receivers, and we were like, "Can you let us know if anybody's actually listening?" and kind of like give us a little warning sign. And so basically, the first 2 days we were interpreting without knowing if anybody was actually listening or not. But it actually happened. We found out later that on the first day, nobody was listening. The second day, they were basically listening the whole time. And then the third day, there was sort of a mix.
Yeah.
So like on the first day, we could have gone on strike. Nobody would have noticed. The second day, people would have did really depend on us. And so the lines blur.
I looked at it from the point of view of client expectations. I surveyed clients. I interviewed them. I watched their reactions to interpreters. And the funny thing that I found is that clients who start off with incidental interpreting, when they saw interpreters working like partners, they completely changed their minds. So in the middle of an interview, you would start with, describe your ideal interpreter, and they would describe like a robot.
Yeah, walking
just
dictionary.
say what the person said. And then you say to them things like, so if the speaker says something offensive, what should the interpreter do? And they're like, does that ever happen?
You wouldn't believe it.
And now, when I was interviewing them, I couldn't say yes whenever there's an American speaking. That won't go in the final cut, will it?
No, we'll cut all of this out.
No, but so the point is that I looked at it from the point of view of clients, and there is good evidence in the literature that clients' expectations can shift. The warning bell is, though, I've not yet found this trace in any research of clients who started off symbolic going anywhere else. We've got traces of clients who started off with that robot mode suddenly going, please help us and be our partners. That we've found cases of. But once they get to symbolic, it just seems like they stick there. Yeah. I don't know why.
But since you mentioned French, I've had this situation sometimes that people, the event is just moving along fine. Everybody's just working with English. And then the French delegation stands up, everybody's frantically looking for the headphones. And then I think that I always see that as a challenge, because then I try to, push on the pedal just a little bit more to keep them hooked, as it were. And some of them will keep the headphones on, which is nice. Yeah. So it's kind of a challenge then to keep them engaged.
I think especially, and let me know if this is true for the both of you as well, but I find that especially in Germany, a lot of people would want to have the interpretation, but if the conference language is English, and especially if you're there with colleagues, they're just too ashamed to actually grab. No, this is actually a thing.
That is true.
Like they don't want to have other people know that you don't speak English at this level, that you're not comfortable listening to everything. And then eventually this kind of incident where somebody speaks with a heavy accent or speaks a different language, that kind of gives them the impetus to
or
finally put on,
maybe.
to like an excuse, and then they actually put on the headsets and they never put them off. And I think, I don't know, there's kind of a...
But it goes both ways. I mean, it works for speakers as well. There is this kind of expectation in some events that, of course, you speak English, and of course, you have you give the talk or the presentation in English.
Yeah,
and everyone regrets it afterwards.
Yeah, including the interpreters.
So I had an event on the construction industry. There was 8 of us on the job, and there were some Italian speakers who decided that they would speak their best version of English. Let's not. But so what happened is a lot of these companies had booked expensive stands at the event. And after they'd heard these 2 guys do their best 16th language English, no one went to their stand. They were just like, don't want to talk to you. The next Italian guys who were up after lunch looked around and went, that didn't work. So they spoke in brilliant Italian, which the Italian booth then rendered into amazing English. And we took relay. And I kid you not, they got a standing ovation at the end of their talk. And you could not get to their stand afterwards. So now whenever I write a book, I'm like, write that incident down. And I think we have to realise that we complain about Globish and speakers using 15th language English. But there is a prestige thing. And if we can convince them that they're actually more prestigious being beautiful in their own language and trusting us to be beautiful as well, because, we are artists, then... See, I say that my favourite people to interpret for are really arty film directors. They're amazing.
Does that make you an artist as well, though? That's good. Sorry, just kidding.
In a way.
Anyway.
So one day I'm going to write a book called Interpreting as Performance. But anyway.
Well, that's the next before that, everybody can copy your first book and then move on to the second book.
See, I didn't even mention it this time.
Well, we're just trying to get to cover it. No, but I actually have another really interesting client who... because you were mentioning the standing ovation thing after the interpreter rendered it into wonderful English in that instance. But I have a client who doesn't want the... So there's this really special presenter that they invited to a conference last year, and we actually recommended very, very, very much so that this would be a simultaneous job. That one part of the conference, because the rest of the conference was simultaneous, but that one particular part was consecutive. And we said, well, this could also be done simultaneously. It would be much better. You would save a lot of time. It would get a lot more emotion across. Everybody who understands English anyways wouldn't have to hear everything twice. And he said, no, I need the people to hear her voice without being filtered through an interpreter, even if they don't understand it. I need the emotion of her voice to carry, and that's why all of that was done consecutively. So I think, and I thought that was a very special instance and kind of an interesting requirement.
Yeah. Has anyone else ever done short consecutive on stage with the speaker? Put your hands up. No, that's where I first interpreted. My first ever interpreting job was in front of 200 French teenagers.
What was the noise level like?
It was a church youth conference in Dunkirk. If anyone knows Dunkirk, not the easiest French to get used to. I'd been there a couple of months, and they said, because I'd interpreted for like 15 minutes in the main street of Brighton the year previously. And they said, look, would you like to do all of the French to English interpreting on stage for this conference? I'd had no training. All I knew was that I'd seen interpreters work and I loved it and I wanted to do it. And it was crazy because it was a Pentecostal church and Pentecostal preachers are not known for their calmness, quietness.
You mean they're quite engaging speakers?
Yeah, they also have a habit of not finishing sentences. Which is, French to English, you can kind of get away with that. I really feel sorry for anyone who has to do that into German. That's impossible. You don't finish a sentence, the German interpreters find you and hunt you down.
Yeah. But coming back to the whole client relationship, what do you do when you don't have direct access to the real client? So when there's an agency in between or some kind of, event agency, or is that an issue to... when you don't have the direct contact to the client, or does it usually work well? Like for getting preparation material, that kind of thing.
Well, I think from the interpreter side, if there's an agency between, you can get a little bit rougher with them because they're kind of used to it anyway. So you can just say, you
Define
can
rough.
be a little bit firm. Let's say firm.
Okay. Demanding.
Whereas if you're, say again? Demanding, that's right.
I need coffee in the venue.
I think that ties actually into our second topic, right? No, but I think if you're dealing with the direct client and you intend to keep that client, you should always have like a certain amount of diplomacy. Whereas with the agency, it's kind of like their job, and that's why they also get a part of the cut to kind of make it easier for you. And then if they don't do the job, then kind of what are they doing instead of just charging?
The other thing I've found is if you get agencies out of trouble, they're really nice to you afterwards. So I have a couple of agency clients who now pay me more money because I saved their rear ends a few times. They're like, your next job is really complicated. Would you like to be paid more money? And I went, yeah, okay. And I just forgot to put my rates back down. And it's one of these things where I would never, ever, ever suggest that we break our kind of standards. But there are times where you arrive at an event and you realize that, the equipment's not as good as it could be, or there was one recently where there was a mix-up as to what language interpreters they actually needed. So they sent Spaniards when they needed... They sent Italians when they needed Spaniards.
It's almost the same language anyway.
Actually, that happened to me as well. They booked us. They initially booked two booths, so the German and the Italian, and then they canceled the Italian when they meant to cancel the German. But nobody noticed it until we actually got there. And then the guy actually looked at us and he was like, you sure you can't do Italian? And we were like, pretty sure. Thanks for asking, though.
So that job, what my Spanish booth mates did, and they were superb, is the sound man, who is a genius, worked with them, and they split a double booth into two single booths with like a fake divider. And they had one interpreter taking the Italian, turning it into English, while the other interpreter took the English and turned it into Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Might as well... Sorry, are you...
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go.
No, you can finish.
No one ever lets me finish on this podcast.
Yeah, no, sorry.
We need to say something.
Yeah, we need to apologize. Anyway, just reminded of this, again, the story that I told earlier this morning when we had a meeting where there was no Portuguese, but there was a Portuguese delegate. And then they did this apparently frequent thing where they tried to fake Spanish. So they spoke Spanish, but it was actually more like Portuguese. And then the Spanish booth helped us out by putting it into proper Spanish. And then we could, work from there. So that was nice.
That's really nice.
Not quite the textbook definition of interpreting, but...
Yeah, but that's actually one of my pet peeves. I mean, I like what you said, that when you're there at on-site and you realize something is actually not the way that it's supposed to be, don't lower your standards. But if you can still do a good job, just do it, just suck it up and do the job, and then complain about it afterwards to your organizer, your agency, or whoever, and make sure that it doesn't happen again. But if you're able to perform well on site, even though it's not how you would like it to be, just do it this once and make sure it doesn't happen again. But I hate when people actually show up and then they just keep complaining like for hours. And I'm just like, I know it's less than ideal, but just do it.
Sorry you didn't get to the buffet first. But
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, the water's tepid rather than ice cold. That's kind of our next subject, actually. Yeah. But I mean, one of the topics we've got here, which is an interesting topic, I'm not saying the C word, is should we come clean about how messy interpreting is? Because most clients think that we just turn up, talk, and it's amazing. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I want clients to see how much we've sweated that day. There are times, I mean, has anyone else had a speaker where the regulation's 20, 30-minute shifts? There was one speaker that I was interpreting for where my booth mate and I alternated every 10 minutes.
yeah, that happened.
He was a French architect who believed that he was the next great philosopher. So we weren't just getting the beauty and the meaning of architecture, we were getting the philosophy of architecture. And by the end of it, both of us were going, please be the finance talk next. Please be the finance talk.
A little reprieve. Oh, my goodness.
But,
yeah.
Go.
No, I think you're right, though, because sometimes, especially, and I like those instances when you do consecutive. I usually am not a big fan of consecutive, as I'm sure a lot of us aren't. But I like that you're present and the client actually sees what you're doing. And just the other day, actually, this week, I had a consecutive job, like an evening affair. And I was literally sweating because you were standing there and there were like bright lights and you were standing there, you were running around the entire time, hovering at the table, helping out here, helping out there. And then also at the end of it, doing like proper consecutive shifts. And I was drenched. I was like worn out by the end of the night. It was totally fine because that's the job in that instance. But then the client came up and he was like, you're really working. And I'm like, no joke. Seriously.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Do you ever sweat in the European institutions?
No.
No.
Of course not. No.
What else is he going to say?
Apart from when you see the words UKIP on the speakers list.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
well, I think if it's about GDPR, it's also quite hairy, isn't it?
the GDPR,
Hashtag GDPR.
Is a very sweaty, sticky topic. Kind of. But I wanted to ask you guys if you have, sort of when the whole thing is over, do you have a routine that you go through with clients or with some clients to follow up, things that didn't work, or maybe just pointing out things that work well and thanking them for them? Or?
I tried for a while. I've talked about this at the last bar camp. We had like a session. If you guys don't know, Alex and I also organized like a little, together with those two lovely ladies, Leonie and Sonja, and a whole host of other fabulous colleagues in Germany, organized a bar camp, which is basically interpreters putting on workshops for interpreters. And we had a session on feedback, on client feedback, on feedback that you get from the clients, but also feedback that you give the clients. And usually I find that we get no feedback except for on-site, kind of like...
Well done.
And that's pretty, yeah. If
I
you
wouldn't
even
be able to do what you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing as well. How do you do it? And the usual answer is kind of like black magic. But
you were amazing. You were amazing. The last interpreters didn't know any of the terminology. I had that once. Yeah. They were so amazed that we actually spent the time learning the terms that when no one was looking, they slipped us a bonus.
Wow. No one was looking.
They tipped the interpreters.
The interpreter, I was out there by myself.
Oh, wow.
Oh. So my routine after that job, go home, find a pillow, fall asleep.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but so I had like a standardized ritual where I actually sent the clients a feedback form, and I was like, especially for the ones that I actually organize conferences for, because sometimes I organize larger conferences with a bunch of booths, and then I had like all these categories like ease of use, so like how easy was it to communicate? Is there anything that I could improve? How happy were you with those languages? Did you get any feedback on those languages? And literally one person within an entire year. I know, right? Yeah.
Everybody loves feedback forms.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like one of those, the one person, she's one of our oldest clients, and she just said, "You're doing amazing. Everything you do is great. We love you so much. Come back soon." And I was like, "Well, that's really helpful. I do appreciate it, but
Yeah, it's flattering, but it's
yeah,
not
it's flattering, but
yeah.
And so I just stopped doing that now. So I don't know if you guys ever done that.
If you'd asked a researcher, we would have told you that clients are rubbish at filling in feedback forms.
That is very true. Yeah. I can now confirm that from practice.
So I have a routine that normally I'll be on the train or the bus home and I'll just send a quick email to the client and just really quickly. And sometimes you have to be careful what you email on the train home because it can still be raw. sometimes like, you're bad. But it was a lovely job apart from that. So, yeah, I tend to just send an email on the way home. And also things like part of my routine is being able to divorce myself from what happened that day.
Yeah.
Because if you get home and your head's still buzzing, and you get home, I have 4 children under the age of 7, so I'm not going home to a quiet house.
Yeah, talking about buzzing, right?
So if I go home and my head's still in interpreting and I literally have 2 girls trying to climb up my legs, it's not going to work very well.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
true.
we did cover this morning as well. So trying to take care of yourself and not trying to take too much home, I guess. Too much.
Yeah, don't
too
beat
much
yourself up
baggage.
if stuff goes wrong, because stuff will go wrong. But I think, as I've mentioned earlier, make sure it doesn't happen the next time if it's kind of within anything that you can influence. If it's just the speaker reading stuff off for like 2 hours, then there's not much you can do. But just pull the plug.
We have a little surprise prepared in a few minutes. Behave, Jonathan. Before that, any closing remarks on the whole client thing? So it turns out we are actually quite straightforward and honest with our clients. aren't
Yeah,
we? And we probably should be.
It just kind of works out better most of the times.
Yeah.
And I also think that if you've made a mistake and it's really you that made the mistake, I think you really just should kind of own up to it as well.
Yeah.
Even if it's uncomfortable, because then I've found that actually makes the client trust you more, because even if you screw up, like, you're still honest with them. It depends on what happened, and it also depends on how you sell it, but I still think that that's the way to go.
I mean, one thing that I would say about client expectations is that I would like to end on just a little thing of, let's not ever think that if we have a bad client, we're stuck with them. Or if I've heard people say, oh, in my market, the rates are going down. That was happening. I mean, in Scotland, you can be 6 months between interpreting jobs sometimes. And I realized that when the market isn't as friendly as it could be, you have 2 options. You can either go, oh, clients are mean and horrible and they should be nicer, and I'm going to go on Twitter and Facebook and tell everyone how rubbish clients are, blah, blah, blah. Or you can pack a little suitcase, go to a trade show and find some new ones. I was having a chat with Henry Liu, who used to be the head of FIT, and he and I agree that the only growth market left for interpreting is the people who currently don't know that we exist. So the people who are going to be hiring us most in 5 years' time are the people who today can't even spell interpreter. Sometimes I can't either. But, let's think creatively about clients and think, well, what kind of companies might need us that don't even know we exist? And when you've helped a client win a multi-million-pound deal, you can have a lot more interesting conversations with them.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So, guys, welcome back to the second part of the podcast. We are going to continue with our next topic, which is Don't Be a Diva. We've talked about that about a year and a half ago, I think.
Do you get the irony of 3 blokes sitting here saying "Don't be a diva"?
Well, yeah, but we do have Beyonce with us, so it's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought the irony was you saying don't be a diva.
I have no idea what you mean.
I was reading the room, and when Alex said don't be a diva, all of his colleagues were going, did he just say that? That's like the Pope saying don't be a Catholic.
Takes one to know one, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, this is going to be our next topic. Don't be a diva. It's just kind of the gift that keeps on giving. And Alex is already turning off my microphone. I can see.
Yeah.
That's
Just
it.
to ready
It's been
to
lovely.
turn it off. Yeah.
So on that topic, because it's definitely a topic that we know for a fact everybody can relate to. If you guys have any good stories to share, any funny anecdotes about any sort of diva antics you've seen, you'll also get a goodie bag. So you don't have to just jump right in. We're happy to warm you up a bit, but we expect some good stories because we know that a lot of you have a lot of great stories that you are just dying to share.
Yeah, since we have Mr. Int Hush in the room, they should, of course, probably be anonymized or pseudonymized, or what do you call that?
Yes, it's always John and Jane Smith.
Yes.
Yeah.
John and Jane Smith.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would like to start with a really funny anti-diva story. I was doing an interpreting job when the Dutch interpreters, the agency just couldn't find any Dutch simultaneous interpreters anywhere in the UK. So they sent court interpreters. And the court, they seemed to manage the first session, and then we break for lunch. And the buffet was all laid out, and these two interpreters came up to me and said, "Can we eat the food?" And I said, "Yes, just don't get any on your suit, not that anyone will notice."
At least they didn't say, "Can we eat the president?" or something.
I said, "Yeah, go eat the food." They said, "Because in court, we think we've done well if we get an old sandwich." It's like, well, we're not in court anymore. Come and eat the food.
That's so sad.
But that was my sweetest anti-diva story, and it made me think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with some court interpreting associations, and we're going to start Operation Buffet. Smuggle hot food into courts for the interpreters, chicken leg under your trousers, and
throw them a lifeline, right?
throw them some polo mints in the break.
But I'm glad you started off with an anti-diva story. Because even if nobody's willing to speak up, I think we all have a few diva stories in the back of our mind.
Yes, we all know that you all have one as well. Yeah. So we're just waiting for you to share.
I don't know. But,
Do you have a word for a male diva? There's so many of them.
And Alex.
We can come up with one right now. Actually,
Yeah,
that's a good
sure.
idea. Because we were discussing on Twitter the other day about panels, men-only panels. And what would you call
Voila.
a proper panel, i.e. a gender-balanced panel or an all-female panel? And there were some good suggestions. I need to look them up because I forget.
Oh,
But there was some good stuff.
Yes,
The flannel thing,
So,
right?
so I decided there was one time when we had Corinne McKay and Sarah Griffin Mason on the podcast, which meant we were almost gender balanced. So it's not a mantle, it's a flannel.
Yeah, so close and yet so far.
Yep.
That's true. So there's lots of divas on panels, of course. But I think one thing that really turns interpreters into divas is temperature in the booth. Because, it's difficult enough already because the booth is such a small, restrained space. And I actually have a few colleagues who are very sensitive when it comes to temperature. Right, Alex? I was actually not talking about you. But I have a few colleagues, and one of them is like it's always too warm diva, and I have a few others who it's always too cold divas, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah,
I don't know if that's diva behavior, but I think that's kind of getting there.
I'm kind of always cold, but it's not diva behavior. I'm just kind of freezing to death slowly. So I don't know. No, but you're right. Like the whole temperature thing is always kind of tricky, especially I actually had a job in Munich once and I was literally dying. I was sweating so much. It was in the summer and the sun was just literally shining on the booth. And there was nothing else that I could take off without it being very inappropriate. And then he was just kind of sitting there like with a tie and everything, full suit, like not a bead of sweat. And I was like, oh, geez, like what, how, I don't even know what's happening. But then I was not a diva. I suffered through it and I just didn't say anything. And
I thought you just took the feather boa off and then it was fine.
See, I have the one thing that I've noticed that gets interpreters really angry. Is anyone familiar with the Incredible Hulk? If you want to see interpreters turn into the Hulk, allow your notepad to move onto their side of the booth.
That's right, space.
The space thing. So, like, there's an invisible line down the middle of the booth.
You're talking about the interpreting space right now. So.
I have an interpreter that I often work with called Laura. And it's really funny because you can tell a lot about interpreters by how the booth space is arranged. So whenever there's a German booth, it's always, the paper's perfect at right angles and all of the glossaries sorted by speech. The Russians going to take their papers out of the lovely big black suitcase whenever they need them. Laura in my French booth, everything's blue tack to the walls.
That's the thing, though. Yeah.
She is Miss Blue Tack. Mrs. Blue Tack. And it's great because we're so used to just sharing space that we now use our notepads to send messages to each other. And sometimes it's just, what on earth did he say? And other times it's just, help.
So a notepad is like WhatsApp, but on paper? Is that how it works?
It's like a tablet that you don't need to turn on.
Wow.
So it has eternal battery life, basically.
So,
but I was
These
actually
are such dad jokes that you guys are passing back and forth.
because we're dad.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any non-dad jokes then? Come on.
I'm not a very funny person, so no, sorry.
That was a humble brag.
So, talking about diva things.
Weird flex, but okay.
I must admit, I feel like the podcast diva because whenever we record a show, Alex has this thing of sending us the draft version for our comments. Alex sends like 3 comments, and they're all like, "That's hilarious. That's so funny. Oh my goodness."
There's 1 or 2 cut this
Very
out.
productive stuff going on there.
Cheering me on.
My comments are, "I didn't mean to say that in public. Can we delete that?" 25 times.
That's accurate.
And the other 10 times is like, this could be controversial.
Exactly. But another thing I think that can turn some interpreters into divas is working with technicians. So we talked about a little bit about this when we set up everything, and because Jonathan used to be
Which was very difficult today, because today the
technician.
interpreter is the technician, so it was kind of tricky to navigate
kind of
that.
a split personality thing going on. Yeah. But whenever goes something wrong and the mic doesn't work, or the booth is too warm, or the sound isn't good, then some people can be quite nasty towards technicians.
Yeah,
I
which
guess.
I don't really get how and why. Like, we can only do our job because this guy's doing his job. Yeah. So I actually once at a conference when one of the speakers went off stage and he read his speech off his iPhone, so he felt like he needed to charge it. And there's this huge, like, industry size, like, plugged into like a high voltage power outlet to power all of the booths. And there's like a warning, and there's a warning label above it says, "Do not remove." And
Don't push this button.
And he pries off like the duct tape to make sure that this stuff stays in there, because he was thinking if he plugs his iPhone charger into the high voltage plug, it's going to charge
it up
faster.
real quick.
And so he rips out the thing, and 12 booths went black.
Oh,
and then the technician was just like, he just knocked on our thing, and he's like, "Guys, I've got this, don't worry." And like within 2 minutes, the whole thing was back on. And I was like, thank you, Jesus, for this technician.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? Exactly.
The other thing is I've learned to be wary of bringing my fellow interpreters food. Because, you imagine there's
Food
like...
that contains garlic, stuff like that.
Or gluten. Or anything to do with animals.
Yeah.
Or butter, or fat, I've gotten to the point where if I see what's on offer, I'll then go back to the booth and say, "Would you like anything they have?" Because you are scared that you'll bring like an almond croissant, and they'll go, "I have an allergy to fresh air. Please don't bring me that."
We should probably add a few options to the booth hangers, like
That's
vegetarian, gluten-free.
But I do think that food is a very touchy subject. The other week I organized a team of interpreters, and they actually sent me feedback. The client sent me feedback first and said everything was amazing, the interpreters were great. And then the interpreters came back and said everything was shit and the food was horrible. And it was literally the food that the CEO of the company was eating. And they were like, "This was the worst food ever, and we will not go back to this assignment unless we get different catering." And I'm like,
Ouch.
what? Like, who are you? So I don't know. How is food such a touchy? I actually once had a job in Italy, and they had freshly made pasta for the crew catering, and the Italians complained, and everybody else was so all of the non-Italian interpreters were in love with the food because it was like freshly made tomato sauce and like homemade pasta, and it was really great. And they were like, "Well, this is very bland and basic," and it was just kind of like.
Wow.
Do you have any divas in the institutions?
No. No, we don't sweat. We don't. No, but I said earlier, temperature seems to be a bit of a touchy subject, which is strange because we actually have quite. This is not a brag. It's just a statement of fact. We have quite nice booths usually. Mm-hmm. We don't have to work in mobile booths too much. So I don't know. It's weird.
I must admit, interpreters in Scotland have become hardened. So no, because literally,
I wonder why that is.
We have done job. There was one job where there was 8 of us on the job, and the job's going to go well when the sound tech comes up to you at the start of the day and says, "Before you see your booths, I'd just like to apologise." It was in a muddy field outside of a factory, and the best he could do after like all this self-leveling stuff, he said, "Every single booth has a 6-inch hole in the back. Just call it ventilation and we'll be okay."
Exactly. But I thought that's what ventilation is, right? It's a big hole.
And then we got to the second day of the job at a different site, and they realised that they couldn't possibly put booths on it because it was ankle deep in mud. So the 8 of us were interpreting off little in-ear headphones plugged directly into an amplifier in a tent. And everyone was like, "Oh, what's lunch?" "Scotch pies and Bovril."
It must have been a very authentic experience then, I reckon.
Well, we did get to drive dumper trucks at the end of it, which is quite fun.
Oh, the dumpers, the infamous dumpers. Was that the job?
Yeah, that was the job where the poor German booth
We just call them
learned
dumpers.
the German for rigid chassis dumper truck which knowing German probably takes you about 3 weeks and 2 sets of teeth to say.
Like 26 syllables.
So these were saying this, and you can imagine it's a truck, 4 days of trucks. They said that a lot. Day 4, the German delegation come up and say, we just say dumper.
Yeah. As you do.
So I have learned a lesson. You know the interpreters who believe that you should never talk to the clients? They're not very clever. Always talk to the clients and go, do we really have to say like 56 letters of German every time we see a truck?
Yeah, and another thing though with being a diva is newbies, right? I mean, new colleagues coming into the booth, that seems to spur some people on to put on their worst behavior, at least.
Why are you guys looking at me?
I don't know, it's just sitting over there.
Yeah, I'm just sitting over here trying not to be a diva for once.
But yeah, maybe I can share a story. It's not very funny, but it just shows the diva thing because in one of my first assignments, I think I was one of the few colleagues back then, that's how old I am, who brought a computer into the booth. And I got
Space age.
I got some sort of indirect bad feedback from a diva kind of colleague that it's
In
newfangled
the sense
stuff.
that, you need this like technical stuff to like be
You
good?
should just
or?
focus on the interpreting, that kind of
Well, there you go. How about that?
How about that?
I have experienced reverse divaism. So I wasn't a newbie at the time. I'd had like 6 years of experience. And my booth mate had like 25 Brexit secretaries of experience. So we're
like half a year?
we're doing this job.
2 days, actually.
And it just so happened. Does anyone else get really afraid when your booth mate just happens to be the world's specialist in whatever the job's on, and you've never seen this stuff before in your life? So we're doing these complicated technical political workshops, and I kid you not, he's like lying back in his chair doing this. The entire time, like he stretched the mic to him so he could lean back and pretend to smoke a virtual cigarette. For his entire shift, my shift, I was holding onto the table, my knuckles going right, going, yes.
dear life.
And I suddenly realized that everything for him was easy. And I thought, what do I do? So I think we need to agree that even if you are the world's expert on linoleum fitting in Estonia, treat your booth mate as if they are helpful, rather than looking at them and going, so you haven't read the 1985 report? What kind of interpreter are they sending nowadays? What do you mean you can't quote Socrates in Greek? So, which actually is really, whenever you're interpreting for does anyone here interpret from French?
Yes.
Okay. Can someone explain to me why every French speaker has to quote a dead philosopher?
I think it just gets beaten into them at school. So
I mean, literally, this was a kind of diva speaker thing where they were doing an industrial safety report of how many people died in their factory that year, which began with, comme Sartre a dit. It's like, really?
Hell is other people. Yeah.
L'enfer, c'est les incidents industriels.
But I wanted to touch on one other thing that we've discussed, I think, on social media, but not in the episode, in any of the episodes yet, which is a bit of a pet peeve, I guess, and that is linked to diva behavior, is that some interpreters are very, very particular about not being called a translator for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Didn't you write a nice article about that?
Yeah, might have.
Somebody did, I feel.
But did you have any real-life experience of that? Did you sometimes have people on your team that...
Do you mean like interpreters losing it and just telling the client, don't call me a translator?
No, it's not losing it, but sometimes in the booth, when it's your shift, some people will kind of correct that, or will actually make an extra point of pointing out, the president just called us translators. Actually, we're
Get out.
Yeah.
They do that?
Yeah, that happens, actually, yeah. Sometimes most of the time it's off mic, but sometimes it's on mic as well.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
That's mortifying.
It is, yeah.
Can I confess to being a diva now?
Yeah.
Okay,
We've been waiting all this time.
So I have this habit where the chair will say, if they remember that we exist, apart from that one guy who's always waving at the booth. Does anyone else have that guy in like almost every conference? The guy with the headset going. And it's always like I don't mind if it's during the chair's speech because no one listens to that anyway, and it's always about haggis and Kayleys and whiskey. It's fine. But when it's like some complicated technical presentation, or when it's during an argument, and you've got going, but at the end of one session, the chair said it was like 2 days of deep sea fishing policy. The chair said, I would like to thank the translators. And so when I interpreted that into French, I changed traducteur into interprète. And my booth mate said to me, can you do that? I went, well, I think I just did.
Now.
So yeah, I automatically, when they call us translators, I change it. But, if there's a mistake, maybe I should keep it a translator.
I sometimes do that, though. I'm just trying to think, I don't have a rule of thumb here. I don't have, a fixed thing, I'm always going to do it or I'm never going to do it. I think it kind of depends on my mood of the day, I guess.
Is it wrong to add it if they didn't even say it?
That is wrong. The good thing is, though, mostly you won't
yeah.
have to make that first choice if you're going to actually translator or interpreter. How are you going to do it? Because they're just going to not mention us. They're going to say, and we would, of course, like to thank all the people who made this event possible, the technicians, the flower people, the caterers, everybody behind, and makeup and the cleaners. Thank you, everybody. And you're just like, what? Awesome.
That does bring out the diva in me. Has anyone else saved their career because of the mute button?
The mute button is dangerous, though. Yeah.
So
I'm just waiting for the day until the mute button actually once doesn't work.
It may have happened already. Maybe it just didn't.
No, I would have noticed.
So
we were actually sorry. You'll get to do that, but there's a special person here who at university taught us to never say certain things using the mute button because it can be very dangerous.
Uh-huh.
She might not be very proud of me.
We're not going to name any names here.
So I once saved a colleague's career using the mute button, and it's kind of a semi-diva story because we were doing some very technical construction conference. And to be fair, the presentation that we were interpreting was amazing, to the point that my very experienced booth mate swore loudly in amazement at what was on the screen. Thankfully, I was like... And so I think what the audience heard was, and so we moved this piece to... And then... So yeah, the mic off button is better. I must admit, I am very much a diva of the equalizer settings on the console.
Oh, yeah.
So I will spend 5 minutes when the other interpreter's working going...
Getting the sound just
getting
right.
the treble and the bass, and the volume's just right until you have the speaker who holds the microphone down by their hips. And you're like... And because I'm a trained sound person as well... We were doing a conference and we'd had a lot of speakers holding their mics really low. And we'd gotten used to it, and you push your volume more and more up in the booth, and then, sorry in advance, Alex, speaker came up and went bang, bang, bang on the mic. I smiled outside, I wasn't smiling inside.
Yeah, but that's not a diva, though. That's just that would have been a natural reaction to somebody piercing your.
I almost went up to them and explained why that's not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, and it's also kind of in our show notes, which we still have, even though we're offline. There's a great article by Evandro
Magalhães.
There you go. This is teamwork.
Audience participation at last as a first. Well done.
You'll get a goodie bag. And he wrote a great article because he used to be at the, oh my God, I'm going to step in it so bad, in the UN, at an international organization.
Probably, yeah.
And he organized a lot of interpreting teams as the staff kind of organizer, sending them out into the missions and everything. And he wrote this great article, What Organizing Interpreters Want You to Know. And you're an organizing interpreter. I'm an organizing interpreter. I'm sure, Alex, you're dealing with a lot of people.
I used to be.
You used to be. Mm-hmm. I know that you used to be. And I'm sure that you actually are in contact with the people, planning for the trips and planning for your missions and stuff.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that I don't say to people when I try to book them for a job. And I'm like, hey, I want to send you to South Africa for 2 weeks. And then all I get back is 10 nasty emails like, can you answer this? What's the hotel going to be? What's this going to be? And I'm like... I just asked you if you're available, first of all. Can we get to all of that other stuff later? And I think oftentimes what people forget is we still have other stuff going on as well. Like when I'm organizing a team, when I'm organizing a conference, I'm still doing all the other conferences as well. I'm still organizing other conferences as well. So I'll get to all the information that you want to have, maybe not at the time that you need it right now. And I think a lot of colleagues become real divas when dealing with other colleagues. And I don't understand why, because we're kind of all in the same boat. And I feel like we should be more helpful than anything else.
You know what would be really helpful? You've never actually sent me any work, Alex.
There's not a lot of stuff going on in Scotland that I'm aware of. If there ever is, you'll definitely be my first port of call.
So I've had a couple of experiences with that. Mostly they've been really good. So I've had to start having a rule where I either work with people that I've already worked with who are good, or people they recommend. Because there are sometimes when you really find it risky. It became very difficult, though, when I got an email once saying, can you find 20 specialised pharmaceutical interpreters for a conference over 10 different languages?
That's not a thing.
And I'm like, how many? Okay, so I mean, I pulled in a lot of favours for that. But there was one time where I was asked, does anyone here do court interpreting at any... Right, okay. So I sent an email I got an email in from a legal client saying, can you find court interpreters? After explaining that wasn't my usual thing, I said, okay. Eventually we came to the point with, could you deal with it? So I went on the register and found the 3 interpreters within 50 miles of their office for the languages they wanted. It was a real language. I sent emails to 3 interpreters offering them what looked like a guaranteed, pre-confirmed job. And I said, can you give me your rates? Can you send me, I think I asked for their rates, their availability, their rates, and could you give me a full quote, including everything, travelled a lot, because I was going to talk the client into paying for travel and food. I want a full quote covering everything, but I need it by Monday morning. Okay. How many interpreters do you think wrote back to me out of the 3 before the deadline?
0.
I got 1 out of the 3. And then another one wrote back to me, I kid you not, Thursday afternoon, without any sorry or anything, saying, oh yeah, I just got round to it.
Wow.
So, I mean, sadly, the client, it was one of these lawyers' offices where they said, you mean we have to pay?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the most important thing for me when I'm organising is I understand people are always busy, probably busier than me sometimes. Except I have 4 kids. But, you know,
under the age of 7.
If you're like working 24 hours a day, can we have an autoresponder on your email, please? Yeah. That says, I'll get back to you. And then
not that hard, right?
And then can you get back? It's the one thing I'm diva about is I always pad deadlines because I know that interpreters aren't the quickest people to write back. Unless they're desperate for work, in which case they write back to you before you've sent the email. and their quote is, I'll do it for a bag of peanuts, please just give me work. So yeah, like writing back in good time would be so nice, like before the deadline. So I always give myself padding, knowing that everyone's going to be late. So it'd be nice to get an email before the deadline with everything that we need. For that 20 interpreter job, out of the 30-odd interpreters that I ended up emailing, over half didn't get the concept of an all-inclusive quote.
I guess we have some more work to do there.
Okay, boys. Ladies, gentlemen.
Do we have any other episodes, anything you wanted to share? Maybe we should just do it when the mics are turned off.
When everybody could go off record
properly
here.
Anonymized.
Yeah,
how are we
true.
doing on the bingo? We haven't heard any bingos yet, but maybe we didn't do a good enough job of getting in all the references.
Have we not had any bingos yet?
We must have gone around to pretty much
We
everything
must have
now.
gone through a lot of stuff, but
We got your uncontrollable giggles.
we did get those.
Yeah, during the
We did get those even before the comedian. Yeah.
Oh, we have a bingo.
Is it a story?
Divas.
How do you neutralize divas?
Line. We have a line.
Ooh.
To not commit career suicide.
I think it probably depends on how up there it is in terms of diva-ness.
It's just a general remark, which is Bruce mates unofficially interpreting from languages that you have in your combination.
Oh wow.
Officially interpret from whatever.
Yeah.
Like you've just done a bulk of huge stretch of one of your languages, and it's very difficult to say, or of course I unofficially interpret that language, and I
Yeah.
think this X, Y, and Z.
Get out. No way.
Yeah.
How lovely. Yeah, that's great.
I've had those situations, but it was mostly people who were just about to add the language officially anyway, so they were just getting some practice in, and it was fine. But yeah, did you want to follow up?
Diva development, I see a lot.
Diva development.
Yeah, it's people, especially more senior colleagues, when it's not their turn, they leave the booth.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that bugs me.
25 to 30 minutes to get food, talk to the client, I don't know, do their nails. Or...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I find that, I mean, yes, I've got it covered, but it would be nice to be working in a team.
Yeah.
So I'm controversial with this, that I dislike. I dislike the stopwatch. I actually find the stopwatch in the booth thing to be diva behaviour. Certainly the
That
way
would be like the other extreme of what Sonia just
so
said.
the way it tends to go with the interpreters that I tend to work with is, rather than going by exact 25 minutes, we'll look at the agenda, and everyone knows how many meetings actually adhere to the agenda.
0.
But we'll look at the agenda and kind of roughly divide it up by speech. And, you know, if you get occasions where you have a French architect who thinks that he's a new philosopher, you change shift length. Yeah. If on the other hand you have, as I had a guy talking about whiskey for half an hour, for like 40 minutes, most interpreters who've interpreted in Scotland for more than a minute could do an hour of whiskey and not even feel it afterwards. And so I get the, you know, we want to interpret roughly the same amount, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just warning anyone that if you bring a stopwatch into my booth, it will quickly go missing at the first break and it will never be found again.
The tale of the missing stopwatch. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think? Should we wrap it up? Not to keep people too long before drinks.
Yeah,
and
we can start wrapping
because
up.
in about doors are technically already open, but in 10 minutes doors will open for real, and people can come up here as well, and we can go downstairs. So we have a few. I think we got the bingo covered. That's great. If you have any more stories, we can probably discuss them during drinks. So I think we should just say thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming here.
Thanks to all of you. Some of you have come from very far away, and we really appreciate it.
We really do.
Actually, Alex was so nervous when we started this whole thing whether anyone would show up. So
I was like, who wants to listen to us anyway?
And Jonathan got a bit nervous like yesterday.
This morning?
Yeah.
So usually when we do episodes, we have Slack open. It's been really weird to do a podcast without trying to distract them on Slack.
No back channel.
That's very true.
And I spent this morning on Slack saying to the two Alexes, all we've seen is no-shows. Is anyone going to come? Because it'd be a really sad party if it was just us and one party popper.
But it turned out just fine. So thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks again to the Roebuck team. You guys were great, and this is a really lovely location. And this is the point where we move on to drinks.
To more drinks.
And we have prepared a little bit of a conversation starter, I think.
We
Alex.
have, yes. We prepared a little bit of a conversation starter.
Not that you need it or anything, but, you know.
The conversation starter, if you guys want to stick around, is your secret life. So what cool stuff do you do in your free time that isn't interpreting? And actually, we didn't really come up with that. It was also this fabulous colleague, Sonia, over there, who came
this
up
was
with
not
that.
our idea. We stole this from Sonia.
We stole it from her blatantly, but we're giving credit, so there it is.
After the stand-up comedian, I'm really worried about what people are going to say now about what they do in secret.
Okay, so thanks everyone, and give yourselves a warm round of applause, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
You guys are the best. All right.